So today's program, once again, is the earliest roots of the Thanksgiving holiday here in America with Ann Tufo, a historian. And I'm going to turn things over to Joanne and let her talk about the program. So thank you, Joanne, and thank you everybody for joining.
Well, thank you, Dana, and I'm very excited to be at the Rockport Library, and I'd like to say hello to Judy and Zoe and Peggy. It's great to have you, and we'll do a little fellowship here about the Halloween. I just did Halloween not too long ago, about the Thanksgiving holiday and sort of what it means to me. I'm going to do this with a share of a PowerPoint, so I'm going to put that up in just a moment. And it will come into the full screen. And the title this evening is a little bit different from the one that I had originally proposed. It's only because a client had asked for this title, but giving thanks, Thanksgiving practices in America, as American as apple pie. And that's the one thing about Thanksgiving. It truly is that, and it's such a personal holiday. That's me, by the way. And if you want to reach out to me, or you want to, you have any questions or concerns about anything that I've done this evening, please feel free to reach out to me at historic.voices@aol.com. And then you're also welcome to take a look at my website and see some of the other things that I do or I've done at historicvoices.vistaprintdigital.com. And I'm sure Dana will be able to provide that for you as well if for some chance you don't have it. So I deliver my programs in a combination of PowerPoint and a lecture format. So I'm reading along with what I would normally just say. I actually have that in PowerPoint as well, because everyone learns differently. And sometimes people hear better than they see, or they see better than they hear. So I like to combine the two and make sure that people get as much as they possibly can from the lecture format. So, all right, I'm going to give you a chance to take a guess. Has Thanksgiving always been celebrated on the fourth Thursday in November? So you can answer it there with your family or yourself or whatever. Do you think it ever has been? Well, actually, it was one time. FDR decided that it would be a great idea to have the third Thursday in November rather than the fourth Thursday in November, and that would allow a lot more time for shopping. Well, the American people did not like that very much, and it went back to the way that we have it today, the fourth Thursday. All I'm going to say about the fall of 1621 is that you in Massachusetts are the parental figures of Thanksgiving, rather. And so it was because the Pocahontas Indians and the Plymouth Colonials came together as a result of a successful harvest, and they expressed gratitude that was demonstrated in the manner represented by both cultures. And basically what I'm saying there is exactly what Plymouth Plantation says, and I think that they are really the authority on this sort of thing. But there are lots and lots of stories. There's myths, there's legends, there's all kinds of things that go on regarding this particular holiday. So I just stated the fact in that, but we're going to talk about so much more this evening. We're going to talk more about food and gratitude, and everyone expresses those things differently. They can be to an individual, just a small family. They can be represented in a large family. Some people think that Thanksgiving is a day to go to church. Many families pray. The only time they pray together is on Thanksgiving, or maybe Christmas and Easter, but Thanksgiving, often families that don't normally pray together or say anything will address their thanks for the people that they're with, for the blessings that have been bestowed upon them, regardless of where those blessings come from. We are a nation of very, very different people. We are still a melting pot. We will probably always be a melting pot. That's my historic and personal opinion on that. It is always changing. And because I am the granddaughter of immigrants, and you may be as well, you probably understand that the closer you are to new immigrants to America, the stronger the ethnic influence is. But as the generations progress, they become more assimilated, but yet not. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. What I really want to talk about in the beginning is what makes food American. Nearly all of today's popular foods originated in other countries. Ingredients, recipes have been introduced by colonists, settlers, immigrants. There are native ingredients that play a key role, especially in Thanksgiving. And many of the New World foods arrived to the United States via Europe, as opposed to anywhere else on the planet. And examples of these things are apple pie, hot dogs, hamburgers, pizza, tacos, chocolate, jelly beans, ice cream, steak, potato salad, watermelon. And one of those things we often eat Thanksgiving is apple pie. Some families have that. And there are also regional specialties, for example, Tex-Mex. The native foods really play a big part in what we choose to eat at Thanksgiving. There are several varieties of vegetables, nuts, mammals, and fish that are indigenous to North America. Notably, that's beans, corn, squash, and then there's they're known as the Three Sisters, upon which several Native American diets have been based. American bison. Some of the foods also had old world varieties like strawberries. They very much were an old world fruit. You have indigenous recipes that included succotash, corn cakes, and baked squash. Now, in my family, there's always succotash on the table for Thanksgiving, because I don't know why, but it's there. There are hybrid dishes, and these are old world recipes that were adapted to include new world ingredients, for example, cornbread. So Europeans like their breads, but they did not really have cornbread in Europe. So when they got here, that was an adaptation that they made. There are ethnic blends. So when diverse cultures and cuisines settle together in a region, foods mix. For example, chop suey, which really isn't a Chinese food. It's something we created and is very Americanized. So speaking of China, let's talk about a Chinese American Thanksgiving. So there are going to be different foods included on the Thanksgiving table of different ethnic groups in America. So with the Chinese, dumplings, fish cake soup, gemai tea, gravy made from shiitake butter, mochi and pumpkin pie, Mongolian hot pot, roast duck stuffed with sticky rice, stir-fried green beans. These are some of the things that can be on a Chinese American table. And there are, now I chose Chinese only because of my Le Choi little ad before that, but there are so many other Asian cultures that have sort of similar things to this on their table. So unfortunately, I can't cover every culture and subcultural group in America this evening, but we certainly can talk about it. And at the end, you can even make comments and tell me the kinds of things that your family has, because I'd really love to hear that. But this is mochi here on the right-hand side in the photograph, and they've made it really decorative, but it's like a gummy, cakey kind of dessert thing, but they've added a pumpkin kind of element to it. Another thing that the Chinese do is how do they stuff a turkey? Well, they use Chinese preserved sausage, shiitake mushrooms. They can use dried shrimp, sticky rice with chestnuts. So often these tables, these ethnic tables, will also hold a turkey out of acknowledgement of the American holiday, but they'll use their ethnic foods on the table as well. So, going back to our foods and traditions, there have been some generic traditions and food fads, and the history of these items can be traced to the old world. And I mean things like corn dogs, Chex Mix, Rice Krispie treats. They actually do have roots in other places. And so you'll see that a lot. One of manufactured foods, things that foreigners typically associate with the United States, Campbell's tomato soup, moon pies, Kool-Aid, Jell-O, Kraft macaroni and cheese, TV dinners, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Hershey bars. Well, what stood out to me in this one was macaroni and cheese, and it made me think of the South. So I cut all of my historic teeth up north, but I now live in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And so when I was actually born in the South and raised in the South. I was a military kid, but my parents were both from the North. So I was received my post-secondary education in the North. So when I moved south, of course, permanently, I was reminded of what they serve in the South. So first of all, they say, happy Thanksgiving, y'all. It's even in the way the word is said. So I grew up saying happy Thanksgiving with the emphasis on the giving part. In the South, they say happy Thanksgiving, where the emphasis is on the thanks part. It's very interesting. Their table is also very interesting. They make cornbread dressing, which is not stuffing. Stuffing is an entirely different thing. Dressing is mixed together, cornbread with celery and onions and things like that, and then it's baked, but not inside the turkey. Candied sweet potatoes, ambrosia, pecan pie, pimento cheese. Pimento cheese is a big deal here in South Carolina. You see it more in the North now than you ever did before, but it really is a big deal down here. There's good pimento cheese, bad pimento cheese. Everybody talks about pimento cheese, and at every party you go to, it's there, but it's also going to be there at Thanksgiving dinner. Probably as an appetizer. There's going to be mac and cheese on the table, creamy corn pudding, oyster casserole, depending on where you are, your location in the South, certainly cornbread and deviled eggs. But there's so many other things, fried okra, black-eyed peas. It really just depends. Greens, collard greens. And a lot of that you'll also see on the African American table, because a lot of these traditions in the South moved north with African Americans. And a lot of the things that they add are very much something that is they've always had on their table, and a lot of those things are Southern. And in the South, we don't stuff our turkeys because we fry them. Now, fried turkeys have gotten to be sort of big throughout the country in recent years, but in the South, they invented fried turkeys. And if you haven't had one yet, that doesn't look very appetizing, but I have to tell you, they are delicious if they are done right. And we wash it all down with A pitcher of sweet tea. Yes, ma'am. That's what we get at the end. What is a traditional Thanksgiving dinner in America? Well, most historians agree, and food historians agree, that it's roast turkey, turkey stuffing with onions and celery, mashed potatoes, gravy, green beans, corn, dinner rolls, cranberry sauce, pumpkin pie. Boom, that's the traditional Thanksgiving dinner. So we all know that there are probably different things on our tables from home to home. We have 3 different kinds of sweet potatoes now. It's gotten really out of control in our family. Well, maybe not. Let's go back to those American food ways again. The Native American foods, they concentrate on what I mentioned before, the 3 sisters, and the 3 sisters are corn, squash, and beans. And it's not one cuisine, but it's several cuisines within the Native American population. But look at this, 2 out of 3 of these, and maybe in your family, squash is also on the table, but 2 out of 3 of these Native American foods are found on a lot of tables at Thanksgiving. So it varied differently from tribe to tribe, what foods there were, the way they procured the foods, the cooking techniques, the dining customs, and the religious observances. And a lot of this, the reason that I'm talking about this so much, the native and indigenous foods, is because we know the part of the puzzle that involves the foods that we eat today. But what did the indigenous people or the Native Americans literally bring to the table in all of this? And this is really how it came to be. Now you have to remember too that Native Americans depended on local foods, Northeast maple syrup, Great Plains, buffalo, in the Southwest, cactus, Pacific Northwest, salmon. So you're also going to see that Native American families throughout the country that celebrate Thanksgiving, it's going to be a little bit different from area to area because of the things that they've had integrated into their diet. So you might see maple syrup in the Northeast. More than likely, though, you're going to see cranberry sauce, and that, of course, is a Massachusetts sort of thing. And that I will not even sit at a Thanksgiving table that doesn't have cranberry sauce. So if you're from the Great Plains, you might include buffalo in your meal. There's various ways of having cactus. If you are from the Southwest, maybe even Mexican Americans as well, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, might integrate cactus into the meal. There were agricultural communities that had different food issues from the nomadic people. So of our indigenous people, we had people who kind of stood still and worked in agriculture. And then there were others that were nomadic. They moved around. So people living in cold climates often employed different preservation techniques from those living in the deserts. A lot of our food is going to be different from place to place, our traditions, because maybe we're from the Southwest, or maybe we're from San Francisco, where you have a lot of Chinese and Japanese people, and there might be that influence in your table. Why do we know this? How do we know this? Well, we know it not because our Native American people wrote it, but the Europeans wrote it. And they often had no clue what they were seeing or eating. They didn't really know, but they did their best to describe it on their own personal knowledge. But they did have a socio-cultural bias. And so there had to be translations that were giving us inaccurate information. There were some really early reports from California mission fathers, French fur traders, English colonists, and they're being looked at today for accuracy. But we're getting better at knowing what the native people really actually ate. So again, it was native to the region. We talked about the Three Sisters, but a lot of nuts, berries, fruits, fish, small game like rabbit and squirrel. People living near the ocean, shellfish, it's the same thing today. If you live in Eastern Maryland, you may have crab cakes on the table on Thanksgiving. People who were living in the northern regions, again, they tapped maple syrup, and the Plains Indians hunted buffalo. Some Native people put a great emphasis on structured villages and agricultures, and again, others more nomadic. And that's sort of what that looked like. Well, in one particular tribe. Columbus and other settlers, most notably from Europe and Asia and Africa, had a tremendous impact on the Native American foodways, and they started their old world ways and the introduction of old world plants, animals, spices to the new world was referred to as the Columbian Exchange. And this brought pigs in, oranges, apples, cattle, grapes, onions, olives, cabbage, lettuce, carrots, things that were not watermelon, things that were not indigenous to America. 90% of American homes eat turkey on Thanksgiving. For a total of about 45 million turkeys are consumed on that one day. Let's talk about the introduction of old world recipes and white man's foods. So some of the things that get introduced from Spain, flan and paella, the different kinds of wines that were available in Europe, whiskey, apple pie, ice cream, sauerkraut, and these are some things, particularly sauerkraut, is used on your Pennsylvania Dutch tables and some of your German tables on Thanksgiving. And again, tools and techniques are going to have a lot to do with what these people ate, bartered, and exchanged. And so there's a tremendous impact of European foodways on the Native Americans. And the Native Americans that encountered Spanish settlers were exposed to different foods than those that encountered French, English, or Dutch cuisines. So it really, it's very, very interesting. This exchange of foods worked both ways, and it becomes very, very unique. And yes, this has happened throughout the world and throughout other cultures, but really pretty blatantly in American culture, and in such a great way. And of course, location, location, location. Southern California missions, their impact was much greater than places where the encounters were less friendly and regular. So if you had a less friendly interactions between people, then there wasn't as much intermingling of cuisines and food. So let's talk about Mexican American Thanksgiving. So that's going to include things like tamales and chili con queso and homemade pasteles and ensalada de manzanas, which is apple salad, fried polenta with chorizo, mango, pomegranate, guacamole. That's kind of a fancy thing that you're seeing on Mexican American tables. You're seeing buttermilk biscuits, roasted corn, roasted chile with lime in broccoli, all kinds of things. But you're also seeing, again, turkey. So you see around this platter here, this turkey platter here, you see a lot of things that are reflect what I've talked about over on the left-hand side. One of the things I find very interesting is how people ate, how the Native Americans ate. And they often had these spoons. And we believe that when you were invited to a feast, you were expected to bring your own dish and spoon. Each person ate in silence. They either sat or they stood. And anyone coming in at mealtime is invited to eat and is expected, as a matter of etiquette, to take something. Sorry about that. Those were backwards. The America, the melting pot. So every group of people who settled in America, we've talked about the Native Americans, but they all contributed something. And traditional cuisine added to our national melting pot, because truly the food in the early days was not so great or not so interesting. It was what we had to eat. We ate because we had to eat, not because of all of these wonderful cuisines coming together. So you have your native North Americans, you have England, you have the Netherlands, you have West Africa, Sweden, Russia, Spain, Portugal, Ireland, Scandinavia, Japan, Central Europe, India, the Caribbean. So if you go to any of these houses, you're going to see some really interesting things. So let's talk about the English, the Dutch, the Spanish, the first explorers, and the non-native cuisines start to take root. And nowhere are you going to see that more than in Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts. And New York to a degree, but Massachusetts, of course, was way ahead until Philadelphia really started to get its name. Your boy Ben Franklin came to Philadelphia and brought all these great ideas that he had seen growing up in Boston, and brought them to Philadelphia, which becomes the capital of the United States. And there's primarily English, Dutch, Swedes in that area. You're going to see up north in Massachusetts, primarily English. And so the food is going to represent that. Let's talk about the Pennsylvania Dutch, who are not really Dutch, they're German. And I worked as a tour guide in Lancaster, Pennsylvania for a period of time, and learned a lot about the Amish and the Mennonites. And they have some very interesting cuisine there. They actually have a potato filling, which is mashed potatoes and stuffing mixed together, if you can imagine that. And it is delicious. And they believe in the other Holy Trinity, which is, well, they're big into they're big into sorry for the distraction. They're big into carbohydrates, for sure. You're going to see a lot of that. And that's because these are people that still to this day work very, very hard. They're going to use a lot of things from their gardens, like chow chow and piccalilli, which is pickled vegetables. Chow chow is a sweeter kind of pickled vegetable. Apple dumplings are going to be on the Thanksgiving table, and chicken pot pie with hot bacon dressing as well. You'll also see sauerkraut, cream dried corn, and apple butter. And again, you'll see turkey. How about the Scandinavians? What do they do? Well, I'm throwing the Danes and the Swedes and the Norwegians all sort of together, but these are some of the things that you would see on their table, and that would be red cabbage, lingonberry sauce, which is sort of like cranberry sauce, but not. Buttered toast with foie gras, haricot vert, which is with roasted almonds, which is green beans with roasted almonds. And you'll see smoked fish for sure. What is really interesting, one of my favorite facts about Thanksgiving is that the Pilgrims lived and worked in the city of Leiden, en route to the New World. And in Leiden, which was in the Netherlands, they have a gathering every year on what is our Thanksgiving Day in a 900-year-old church called the Peterskerk. And they celebrate the perseverance and the good fortune of the early American settlers. And I think that's a wonderful kind of tradition and an homage to internationally. So let's talk Italians. So I'm Italian American, but I only had a few Italian American Christmases because we were in the military, so we didn't get home to our Italian family, that branch of the family. But the first time I ever went, well, boy, was it a surprise. It wasn't a surprise that there was a lot of food, because there's a lot of food at any Italian Sunday dinner. But Thanksgiving was just really unbelievable. But it was food that I never associated with Thanksgiving. I was about, that I could remember, I was about 8 or 9 years old. And it was all this stuff like prosciutto and capicola and mortadella and sopressata. And then you had your cheeses, the Reggiano, the Pecorino, the Gorgonzola, the mozzarella, the taleggio, and it all looks like that. Isn't that delicious looking? And before the turkey, you had Italian wedding soup. You would have some sort of baked pasta, something. Excuse me. So it could be lasagna. You had meatballs. You had braciole, which is like beef that's stuffed with all kinds of good stuff. Baked ziti or stuffed shells or manicotti. And then stuffed artichokes, one of my favorite. And that would usually be served all before the turkey hit the table. Now, this was what was weird for me. And this was Italian stuffing. I was used to my Irish English mother's stuffing. So I had never had this. So I'm just going to let you read that for a moment. Sorry. Well, I have a cough and a drink of water. Oh, I apologize. Anyway, an Italian stuffing for the turkey is very rich and very intense. It's rough cut cubes that are bigger than your normal cubes of bread for stuffing. And then you have sausage, and that sausage gives it a kick of fennel. And then you've got loads of basil and oregano and garlic, and it's a different experience. Sorry, I live in South Carolina where it's always allergy season. So here's my own personal history. I ate in Navy mess halls for many of my formative years on the holidays, because if my dad was not somewhere other than where we were stationed, we would, excuse me, we would go eat with his men at the mess hall. And it was amazing. The Navy did very good food. And when you arrived, there would be all of these sailors who, of course, I really apologize. Just give me a little bit more water. So you'd arrive and there would be sailors Half of them would be dressed as Indians, the other half would be dressed as pilgrims, some of them as pilgrim ladies, and these were all guys. In those days, you didn't have a lot of women in the military that were going to be in the mess hall at Christmas, because usually women in the military were nurses and they were officers. This would be with enlisted men. And they took care of you. There were like boxes of candy for the kids and cigarettes and booze for the adults. It was crazy, for free. Thank you for your tax dollars. But this was the way of the military's way of saying thank you to the families, and they really cared about the families. And there was every kind of food you could imagine. There was everything you would want for Thanksgiving and more. And I didn't really know other kinds of Thanksgivings except my Irish English grandmothers, which was very much the traditional stuff. And then, like I said, when I went to that Italian fiesta, it was really amazing. And I saw within my own American perspective that I was of many cultures, just from Thanksgiving and the way that gratitude was expressed. And that's another thing that I want to emphasize as much as possible, when I emphasize American tradition, is that for some people, watching football with their family on Thanksgiving Day or going to a football game or whatever is their way of showing thankfulness and showing gratitude for their family. For everyone, it is different. And I think that among my favorite Thanksgivings in my life was the year that I went to a homeless shelter and had the honor of serving food to these folks. And I think that holidays can be difficult for people if they don't have families. And I think that if we know someone, like I'm a single person, so I'm very grateful and very blessed to have family and friends that I never have to worry about a place to go. But I think we have people in our lives, and it could even be yourself, that you don't have a place to go. And I think there are always options. No one should let themselves be alone unless they want to be on Thanksgiving, because there's just too many people out there that need someone. So hopefully that could be your way of showing thanks. So I want you to put on your thinking cap. What city is home to the oldest Thanksgiving parade? Well, I'm happy to say it's Philadelphia, my town, as I call it. As a military kid, you don't know where you're from. So when you do figure it out, it's a great thing. And for me, it was Philadelphia. So in 1920, the Philadelphia Gimbels Brothers department store had a parade. And it was 50 people with 15 cars and a fireman dressed like Santa Claus. And it ended with Santa on his sleigh. And this signaled the arrival of the holiday season at Gimbels. Well, today it's much bigger, and it's called the C6 NBC Dunkin' Donuts Thanksgiving Day Parade. And it was the inspiration for the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in 1924. And one of the films that I always recommend that people watch, and I think is the perfect Thanksgiving Day movie, is Miracle on 34th Street, because I think I actually even teach a lecture about Miracle on 34th Street and what it means to American culture, and how many things from that film tell us about who we are as human beings and as Americans. And there's nothing more exciting for a child and for adults at times. I think I'm past my parade years, but boy, did I go to a few of them. And it eventually was called a lot of things. It was called the Wanamaker's Parade, the Strawbridge and Clothier Parade in Philadelphia. Over the course of time, different people took it over, but it's always been a huge parade. But the largest one this is how they go right now. These are the 5 largest in the country. There's the Macy's in New York, the Thanksgiving Parade in Chicago, the America's Thanksgiving Parade in Detroit, the 6 ABC Dunkin' Donuts in Philadelphia, and the HEB Thanksgiving Parade in Houston. And speaking of the largest, well, the Guinness World Book of Records had the world's largest pumpkin pie made by 40 pastry chefs in New Bremen, Ohio, which was approximately 5,000 slices. It took 187 cans of pumpkin, 200 dozen eggs, 100 gallons of evaporated milk, 525 pounds of sugar, 3 pounds of pumpkin pie spice, 7 pounds of salt, and 14.5 pounds of cinnamon. That's a big pie. The first Thanksgiving Day football game was played in 1863, where Philadelphia, on November 17th. The edition of the Evening Telegraph newspaper said this: a football match between 22 players of the Young American Cricket Club and the Germantown Cricket Club will take place on Thanksgiving Day at 12:30 on the grounds of the Germantown Club. So, and I used to live on Germantown Avenue in Philadelphia. I know exactly where the cricket club is. So let's talk turkey. Gobble, gobble, gobble. So in 2022, Americans will spend an estimated $1.1 billion on Thanksgiving turkeys. That's an increase of roughly 151 million. In 2021, we spent about 985 million. And yes, turkeys are more expensive this year, although we were led to believe that. And then yesterday I went to the grocery store and got a whole turkey for $15, whereas 2 weeks ago, that same turkey was $60. So they say that there was a bird flu and some kind of avian flu that affected the turkeys. I don't know, there's a few explanations. I just know this, that the turkey breast that I paid $40 for last week was $20 this week. So it was better to wait. I was getting nervous though. 46 million, that's the number of turkeys expected to be consumed on Thanksgiving Day. 293 million, that's the number of Americans likely to be eating a turkey dinner. 1.1 billion is the projected spending on turkeys this Thanksgiving. And did you know that turkey hens, females, are usually sold as whole birds, and the toms, the male, are processed into turkey sausage, turkey franks, tenderloins, cutlets, and deli meats? The heaviest turkey ever raised was 86 pounds, about the size of a large dog. That's a big turkey. Female turkeys make a clicking sound where the male turkeys gobble. The hens do not. And that's what the difference between a male versus a female turkey, what they look like. And this is another one of my fun statistics, that the Guinness World Book of Records for the fastest turkey carving is 3 minutes and 19.47 seconds. And the world's largest serving of green bean casserole weighed 1,009 pounds, and Green Giant broke the record on November 20th of 2019. So that's a fresh record. The largest pecan pie ever made weighed 41,586 pounds, and it was made at the Cohen Stadium in El Paso, Texas, on May 22nd, 1999. 1,500 pounds of pecans, 13,000 pounds of sugar, 850 pounds of margarine, 200 pounds of salt, 6,700 pounds of eggs, and 9,700 pounds of corn syrup. That's about what goes into a pecan pie, or a pecan or pecan or pecan. There's lots of ways to say it. No right way, apparently, but that's pretty much what it seems like is in a piece of pie down here in the South. So there will be a turkey getting pardoned this week, probably, by the president. And this, I've done a lot of reading on this, and there are, the best place to go to is to the White House's official website, and they'll tell you about a lot about it. But there was no real day before 1963 where they said, let's pardon a turkey. There were, where we consistently did it after that. Actually, it's probably more after the 80s that we were consistently doing it. So here and there, depending on different different administrations and their relationship with the poultry associations, etc. It goes back as far as Truman, probably, although presidents had been getting turkeys as gifts around Thanksgiving since about the 1870s. So, but it was really more in the last 40 or 50 years or so where this whole turkey pardoning thing became so big, and you see it on television. And I always look forward to it. I just think it's a great tradition. And I want to finish here with 3 quotes that are Thanksgiving quotes, and then we can take questions. I'll see if I can answer them for you. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "I awoke this morning with my devout thanksgiving for my friends, the old and the new." Henry Van Dyke said, "Gratitude is the inward feeling of kindness received. Thankfulness is the natural impulse to express that feeling. Thanksgiving is the following of that impulse." And I'd like to finish with John F. Kennedy. "As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them." And so I am going to right now leave my share and come back to, we've got Peggy, we've got Judy, we've got Zoe, we've got you all stuck around, and Rachel joined us. Hello, Rachel. So are there any questions, Dana?
You've done a great job, as comprehensive as one could do, I think, based on Thanksgiving, etc. Does anyone have questions or comments? I wish this came with a slice of pecan pie, because since you mentioned it, I've just been thinking of that.
Well, when of course, I go through my presentations before I do them, and I was so hungry. I can't wait. I usually can't wait for Thanksgiving, but I really can't wait this year.
Anybody have questions for Joanne or comments?
So if you don't, I will finish up. We've got a few minutes. I can't begin to tell you, growing up in the military is very different from growing up in the normal world. Anyone who's grown up in the military, we don't really know it until we get older and we start to talk about our childhood, and people look at us very strangely. And I also do another presentation called Military Brats, and it's all about growing up in the military and famous people who grew up in the military. And what it's like now versus what it was like then. And, I can honestly tell you that those who are in our military struggle financially. There's no doubt about it. I didn't know that we did. I always say this, I didn't know we were poor, but I guess we kind of were. But we had everything we needed, and the military saw to that. But it was not easy on my parents. But it can be even harder today in today's world. So there are a few things that you can do. And one is, in almost every area, there's a chapter of Blue Star Mothers. And Blue Star Mothers, I know in our area, I think they do this in most areas, they send shipments out to the deployed troops. So that's something you can do. You can contact your Blue Star Mothers or and say you'd like to make a donation of, Christmas candy or whatever it is they need that they'll be sending in this year's hero boxes. Usually they ship around the 1st of December. So if you feel like, I want to do something, that's a great cause. But there are so many other causes. And I think the way that we get back so much is by giving and expressing gratitude. And so that's something you can do if you're not feeling full of the spirit. I think that is something that will get you where you need to go. But there are so many wonderful organizations that could use your help and your thanks, and especially places that serve Thanksgiving meals to those who can't provide their own meals. So any other concerns, questions, comments before I leave?
I love that you ended with that. That's a lovely touch. And I think it's important holiday times also to think of those people who, for whatever reason, either are alone, isolated, away from their loved ones, or may have some difficulties with putting food on the table. And so that's a lovely, lovely gesture. And it also gets us out from thinking just of ourselves, which is also a nice thing to do too, because it is about being thankful.
Great. It is. And I'm really thankful to be able to do this for you folks this evening. And I just wish you the most wonderful and exciting holiday season as we approach it.
Well, thank you, Joanne. Any last minute questions or comments for her? I just want to say thanks to you, Joanne, and also thanks to the Friends of the Rockport Library for sponsorship. And I will wish everybody a nice evening and say good night, and we'll hopefully see everybody soon.
All right. Bye now. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Dana, all right.
Thank you, Joanne. Good night, everybody.